In this video, I will talk about alternative data. What is it after all? Does it work and is it worth it? Alternative data is a pretty big buzzword in the investment industry. Buy-side firms spend millions of dollars on purchasing alternative data sets. There's the entire industry of alternative data vendors, and some big conferences and industry groups are entirely dedicated to alternative data. The word alternative is normally used to describe something that is new or different. And alternative data is oftentimes defined as a completely new phenomenon that only appeared a few years ago. And many investors are still debating, does this new thing even work, or is it just a marketing hype? So let's take a step back and reflect on the nature of alternative data. Is it really that new or that different? Decades ago, long before big data became a thing in the investment management, everybody knew that the single most valuable commodity in the investment world is information. Because collecting and processing information to make investment decisions is all this business is about. And alpha hunters have always been after informational edge, because informational edge is how you win the zero-sum game of trading. As far as I'm concerned, there's only three ways to gain an informational edge. First is to get an exclusive information nobody else has. Second is to get the information before your competitors do. And third is to look at the information at a slightly different angle. Now, the first one is the most obvious one, but also the regulation concerning the use of material non-public information has become very strict over the years. And this source of the informational edge is sort of illegal and is completely off the table. And the other two sources, investment managers have been using since forever. Years ago, hedge fund managers would literally send their junior staff to count store visitors and count cars on parking lots to estimate sales numbers at the stores. They would also count windows with lights on and off to predict hotel vacancy rates. Private equity companies would send their analysts to the company's premises at the remote locations to speak directly to the employees, and even taxi drivers to get a sense of the local economy and what is really going on with the companies. And this information, collected independently from the sources that are not necessarily controlled by the company in question, is exactly what alternative data is. So the idea is not really new. What is new is how technology changed the shape and the form of this information. Today, pretty much all the information around us is being digitized and is becoming available in the form of massive big data sets. So today, instead of picking up a phone and call people to collect a public opinion on the product or a company or a TV show, we have social media sentiment, credit card data, email receipts, and streaming TV view count. Instead of sending interns to count cars and store visitors, we now have satellite images, drones, and sensors. Instead of hiring 500 research analysts to sift through a library of newspapers, we now have natural language processing algorithms that can interpret news feeds and conference calls and deliver the result in a machine-readable format in real time. Information digitization created a completely new use case for fundamental information. It can now be used in a purely quantitative process powered by machine learning. By the way, if you haven't seen my other video when I talk about machine learning hedge funds, I recommend you check it out. Alternative data is becoming even more popular now after we've been through the pandemic and the lockdown, and we witnessed an unprecedented economic uncertainty. So investors are trying to track how the economy is recovering, and they no longer just rely on publicly available information about jobless claims and retail activity. They now look at a very granular information like restaurant bookings, foot traffic at airports, and internet search for public transportation. But alternative data is not only a valuable source of information, it is also very messy and noisy and hard to work with. So in response to the demand from the buy side, the entire industry has been created. Alternative data vendors are fintech companies that are focusing on finding, collecting, processing data, and creating data products specifically for investors. And some of these companies are very successful, and their presentations and their back-tested numbers look very, very impressive. Why don't they trade on that information themselves? Why do they put this valuable data out there for everyone to buy? And the answer is that alternative data is not really a great alternative to completely replace traditional informational sources. Alternative data works best in the context of the research program, sort of like a piece of the puzzle. Here's what I'm talking about. One of the most popular alternative data types is satellite images that allow investors to count cars on parking lots to estimate sales numbers at a physical store locations. Now, can this information be a valuable addition to some investors' research processes and help them make better investment decisions? Yes, absolutely. But can you really build a separate, consistently performing and scalable investment strategy based entirely on number of cars on parking lots? So the context in which alternative data works best depends on the type of strategy and the use case. The use cases can be roughly divided into fundamental and quantitative. Fundamental investment managers normally have in-house research analyst teams, or at least one person who covers the company in question. They understand supply chain, competitors, industry, clients, and even rumors about the company. So more often than not, they can tell precisely what is the piece of the puzzle that is missing to complete their entire big picture about this company. For example, they may decide that for company A, for this specific quarter, what is really going to move the needle is the proportion of the online customers versus customers who purchase at physical locations. Now they can think about where they can take this information from. They can look at credit card data, email receipts, foot traffic, satellite images of parking lots, and then they will go and see what vendors offer such products and what product work best for them in terms of granularity, data format, and pricing. Quants don't really have investment hypotheses. They actually derive their investment signals by analyzing data. So in order to create a data sourcing process, quants would put filters based on some technical requirements to data sets. Such technical requirements would include the length of historical sample, coverage, how many companies or securities are included into that data set, frequency of updates, and more. Of course, this is just the beginning of the quantitative process of data sourcing, and that is a topic for a separate conversation, which I will make a separate video on. And to conclude this episode, I would like to answer a question that I received in the comments to my previous video. And the question goes like this: is alternative data worth the money? And what type of alternative data works best? The type of alternative data that works best is the one that suits that specific investment strategy and specific investment research process. And alternative data is worth the money if an investment manager has a clear data strategy and a robust data sourcing process. I will be sharing some of my ideas about building such a process in one of my following videos. In the meantime, please share your experience and your views on using alternative data in the comments down below. And of course, if you haven't done it already, please subscribe to follow this channel, and I will see you soon in the next episode of Arcane Alpha.